I was gonna use my librarian shush, but I don't have to. So you're so very well behaved. Well done, thank you. So welcome to our event. It's going to be live streamed, but it will be concentrating on the speaker, not the audience. So you can relax. If the bells go, it's not a fire alarm. Do not panic. Sit quietly. We'll wait till it finishes. It's just a division bell. Now, Mr. President tells me nothing will happen from their house, but possibly from the LA, so we'll wait and see. Okay, so we're going to start off. I'd like to welcome Mark Webb, the Chief Executive of DPS, to welcome you all to the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deb. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Webb. I'm the Chief Executive of the Department of Parliamentary Services, which includes the library, which is why I get the absolute honour of greeting you and welcoming you here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are here on Gadigal land, and Parliament House has always sat on Gadigal land, and pay my respect to elders past and present, but also recognise that as Australia's first Westminster-based Parliament, we were the source of a very complex history with Aboriginal people across the last 200 years. Mentioning that has a particular significance today, because one of the things you will see about the muster book is it's a record from the colonial period, and it notably excludes the voices and representation of Aboriginal people who lived in the area at the time. So it has been a very complex history, but I am really heartened as one of the current custodians of Parliament about some of the work that has been happening more recently, whether it be the Aboriginal Languages Bill in 2017 or some of the things that you might have walked past our new acknowledgement sculpture outside as you came in, and the wonderful piece of art by Kim Healy in the Fountain Court is a sort of a sign of the relationship we are building with the Aboriginal community, which I think is going to serve us in much better stead for the next 200 years. But we're gathered to talk of history. We are gathered here in the Jubilee Room. This was the Parliamentary Library for many years. Most of these books are real as you look around, so there might be a couple that hide some technology behind them, but most of them are real. But given that this very old building leaks a lot of the time, they are not books that are the only copy that we have of various books as well. They are sometimes a slightly more expendable set of books that we have here. This room does hold a lot of history. And indeed, if you look at the carpet around you, this is carpet that we restored a few years ago, and we went to the original company in England who made the original carpet. They still had the pattern on file from over 100 years ago. And there is a flaw in the carpet. There is a mistake in the carpet if you look carefully at it. Freddo Frog for anyone who finds it first. And when it got here, we said, this is terrible. You have ruined our history. And they said, no, this is a mistake we made 100 years ago. You asked for an exact replica of what we did 100 years ago. So we replicated the mistake. And that is part of the history, I guess, of this place as we move forward. And today marks, though, an exciting new chapter in that history, an exciting collaboration between the Parliamentary Library and Museums of History New South Wales, a partnership that made the digitisation of the muster book possible. It is such an amazing piece, and it required real expertise to happen. Expertise as wonderful as my library team is, expertise that went beyond our capabilities by ourselves. So it's the partnership that has allowed this priceless document to be made available so broadly for the first time ever. We're also excitingly launching our new Parliamentary Archives image database. I had to look down to read that because we affectionately call it Parlimento within the Parliament. And through Parlimento, you'll be able to virtually leaf through these pages, but also many, many other images and documents that we will make available through that mechanism as well. And so it's great to see that come together. The original muster book was penciled, then written over in ink, which sort of highlighted just how rare paper was in the early colony as we went through. And so the record that we have that has been made available through this process is an invaluable link to the history of the colony, an invaluable opportunity for citizens of New South Wales to uncover potential links to their history and their genealogy, and historians will be able to discover new details that will provide wonderful insights into the early stages of the colony when it was set up. We're really fortunate to have two distinguished speakers with us today, Martyn Killion, who's the Director of Collections at Museums of History, and Carol Liston AO, who's the Adjunct Associate Professor at Western Sydney University, specialising in the history of colonial New South Wales from 1788 to 1860. And then to conclude the event, the Deb Bennett, our parliamentary librarian, who you saw before, will give a demonstration of the muster book and Parlimento and how it all works. But before all that, it is my absolute great pleasure to invite the Honourable Ben Franklin, the President of the Legislative Council, up to the stage. President Franklin has been a wonderful supporter of not just this initiative, but so many of the things we're doing to try to bring the Parliament out to the people of New South Wales. If you've seen some of our bicentennial work, you'll see his passion for regional engagement was embedded in that, his passion for engaging with the Aboriginal community to make sure that that was represented through the bicentennial, his passion for this place and this Parliament, and his passion for making sure that all of you get to experience it in the way that we get to experience it is absolutely amazing. And so it is my great pleasure to introduce the President to come up and say a few words. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and welcome all of you to the Parliament of New South Wales. I'd like to begin by also paying my respect to the Gadigal people who have been the custodians of the land and culture of this region for many tens of thousands of years. As one of the two presiding officers in the New South Wales Parliament alongside my friend, the Speaker, Greg Piper, I'm just so excited to be here with you all today. This is a significant and momentous day. The Settlers' Muster Book of 1800 is actually one of the most historically significant manuscripts held by the Parliamentary Library, if not the most significant. It is a rare and unique artefact from the early colonial period, and in fact in 2021 it was honoured by being placed on the UNESCO Australian Memory of the World register, which is a big deal indeed. It's the earliest and most comprehensive surviving record of the colony, almost like an early census that includes names and occupations and land and livestock holdings. And it provides a fascinating insight into the earliest colonial period of New South Wales. In addition to all the interesting information that's contained in the muster lists, including, for example, the number of chimney sweeps and basket weavers and even executioners in the early colony, I've also learnt exactly how the book found its way into the Parliamentary Library still actually remains a mystery. While the former librarian of the Parliament, Dr. Russell Cope, speculated that it may have been donated by the Honourable T.D. Much during his time in the Legislative Assembly from 1917 to 1941, it's actually possible that it was donated much earlier, possibly by Captain Philip Parker King, who was the son of Governor King, or possibly Captain Parker King's own son, Philip Gidley King, both former members of the Legislative Council. However, I'm told that it's equally likely that the manuscript has in fact always been part of the library's collection, as it was authored by the Colonial Secretary's Office, which is one of the founding positions in the First Council of 1824, 200 years ago this year. But despite not knowing exactly how the Parliamentary Library acquired the book, we are extremely grateful to have it and to be the custodians of this incredibly important document. As Mark mentioned, in addition to the muster book, today we're also launching Parlimento, which is the new Parliamentary Archives Historical Image Database. I've toured through Parlimento myself with Deb, and I can tell you that it will be truly transformative about our understanding of both the history of Parliament and the lives of those who came before us. The muster book will be available on Parlimento, along with a range of other images, menu cards, early photos of Macquarie Street, building plans, there's pictures of black rods, there's digitised artefacts from our state's history. And of particular interest, I think, this week will be many photos and documents relating to royal visits to the New South Wales Parliament, including Queen Elizabeth II's visit in 1954. And the most important part is, of course, that everyone can access it. I come from regional New South Wales myself, which is why, as Mark mentioned, I'm so passionate about it. But it means people who live, whether they live in Broken Hill or, Botswana, will be able to see the extraordinary collection that we have in the New South Wales Parliament. And I know that the Parliamentary Library team have worked incredibly diligent to populate Parlimento and will continue to add historically rich and valuable content for everyone to see in the years ahead. That's on you, Deb. I'm reminded of the quote by the Pulitzer Prize-winning author Robert Penn Warren. He said, "History cannot give us a program for the future, but it can give us a fuller understanding of ourselves and of our common humanity, so that we can better face the future." And it's my sincere hope that the muster book and this incredible archive in Parlimento will do just that. So I genuinely encourage everyone to log on to Parlimento via the Parliament's website and to really have a look at it, check it out. It is a remarkable resource, and I congratulate and thank everyone involved in its creation, particularly our friends from the Museums of History New South Wales. And I want to acknowledge the new CEO, my very good friend Annette Pittman, who I know is going to do an extraordinary job in leading this organisation, one of the most critical cultural institutions in this nation, into the future. But it is now my very great pleasure to welcome the Director of Collections from the Museums of History New South Wales, Martyn Killion, to say a few words. Martyn.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'd also like to start by echoing that acknowledgement of country and respect to Gadigal elders. Mr. President, if I can beg your indulgence, there was one element of my job title that you forgot, and that is that I have the best job in the world. Because I have responsibility for the care, management, and importantly, accessibility of the extraordinary collections of Museums of History New South Wales, including the astounding State Archives collection. I can see from a number of the familiar faces already here today and online that many of you will already be familiar with the State Archives collection. But for those of you who aren't, it is an extraordinary collection that is 92 linear kilometres long. Let me break that down for you a little bit. That's 92,000 linear metres of government records dating from just before the European settlement and right up until today. That's a live collection that material is still received into each year from government agencies who transfer those records. And in amongst that material is an extraordinary collection of historical documentation of the New South Wales colony and New South Wales as a state post-federation. Including an extraordinary collection of our own musters and census records, including the 1828 census, which was the first Australian census taken in November 1828, and which is also listed on the UNESCO Australian Memory of the World Register. The State Archives collection has its own interesting history, and it's extraordinary that we have so much material that has survived the test of time, given that somewhat interesting history. I guess it could be said that in the early days of the colony, record keeping was important almost from the commencement, and possibly because of the nature of the colony being a penal establishment. It's nevertheless been subject to the capabilities of different public servants over the time, people like John Thomas Campbell, who served as Governor Macquarie's private secretary, or Alexander Macleay, who started an extraordinary process of registration of documentation that survives today in the Colonial Secretary's correspondence. And of course, over the time, it's also been relocated several times. It's had its fair share of intentional destruction in the 1800s, and has also had various natural disasters that it has nevertheless survived. It therefore comes, or should come as no surprise, that some of that material can be found in different repositories, just by virtue of the fact that that collection has evolved over time. And that's why New South Wales Parliament has the Settlers Muster Book. And thankfully, New South Wales Parliamentary Library does have that Settlers Muster Book, because as a state archive, as a documentary jewel of our state's history, having it in safe hands here at New South Wales Parliament is a far safer place than perhaps negotiating with a private family custody and arrangements for that material. Of course, as part of the State Archives collection, accessibility with something that size and of that nature is always a challenge. And certainly in the past, something like the Settlers' Muster Book has been the subject of work of people who have transcribed that material and published those transcriptions in book form. And it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge today Keith Johnson AM, one half of Sainty and Johnson, who for many years, decades, have made it their life work to surface material through transcription and publishing the material such as the Settlers' Muster Book and subsequent musters and census records as part of the Australian Biographical and Genealogical Record, and now as the Biographical Database of Australia. Of course, digitisation has revolutionised access, and it is no doubt that digitisation of the Settlers' Muster Book will allow it to be accessed by a much wider and broader audience than ever before. It's not only the information, though, that can be gleaned from something like the Muster's Book once it's been digitised. You can start to read more into the documentation, as Carol will speak about. The very fact that it was now evident that it was a penciled document that has then been taken over and written over by ink. It is an extraordinary aspect of that document that could otherwise have been lost through just a black and white microfilm copy or through some form of transcription. There's nothing like a coloured digitised image of original material. That digitisation process can only take place through the driving force of a select number of people and partnerships and collaboration. And I would like to acknowledge the wonderful efforts of the Parliamentary Librarian Deborah Bennett and her team, particularly Susan Walton and Joy Phillips, who have worked together with us at Museums of History New South Wales to reach this point of accessibility for this extraordinary document of New South Wales colonial times. This is Rare Book Week, and this is a Rare Book Week event, and you can't get much rarer than a unique manuscript document that is the Settlers' Muster Book. I think what this initiative and this event is all about is the breaking down of barriers around our institutions and the opening up of the doors to our collections, and it's certainly been made possible through that collaboration. So while the Settlers' Muster Book is a rare book, I can assure you that as a result of this project, one thing that will no longer remain rare in relation to the Settlers' Muster Book is accessibility. It will be accessible not only on Parlimento, but also on the Museums of History New South Wales website, and available 24/7 to anyone and anywhere in the world. It's an extraordinary achievement. Thank you very much. I'd now like to introduce Carol Liston, Adjunct Associate Professor Carol Liston AO. Carol has been a friend and a customer of the State Archives collection for many years, has deep and broad experience and knowledge of New South Wales colonial period and colonial study. She's a former president of the Royal Australian Historical Society, currently the vice president of the Royal Australian Historical Society and co-editor of the journal, but her experience and love for history and the historical research community expands to a number of other organisations that she's been involved in over the years, and this will be something worth waiting for. Carol's explanation of the Settlers' Muster Book will bring it to life. So, Carol, please join us.
Thank you very much. This is the star. This is what you need to be looking at. Released from custody, literally custody for today, but will be available for everyone through the delights of digitisation. First of all, to explain what a muster is. Muster is real people turning up to a given place. So when you fill in the census form, either the census collector or the mailman or your computer gave you that form to fill in. A muster was putting out a public notice that says, you all turn up at this place on this day and we're going to list you and count you. So that means that this is a record of those who could make it to that place on that day. It is an enormous number of names there, but not everyone. Some of the people who are in it, like one of my ancestors, is invisible because the man is there by name and she's one woman off stores, 3 kids, and doesn't appear elsewhere as a named individual. So you have to sort of look at these documents and think of, why are they being collected? What is it that we're looking at? Number one, this is not the complete muster. It does not survive. It is part of a series of documents that, for many of us who've worked in the early colonial history, would know as the Red Book, the muster book that Martyn mentioned, the printed source that we've used for so long, where it's a series of lists. So what we're looking at really is the work of incoming Governor King. So the record we're looking at is dated roughly from his arrival in June 1800. He hasn't taken up the reins of office because Governor Hunter is still here. But together, they're both trying to get a handle on this colony and on its resources. And King is perhaps better equipped than many. He'd been here with the First Fleet. He'd gone to Norfolk Island. He'd gone back to England, and he'd brought the wife and kids back. So he had a greater understanding over the period of colonisation than many others. He wasn't a fly-by-night administrator, filling in time till he got a better paid job somewhere else. So what we have in the so-called muster book is a record 12 years into the colonial settlement. And I don't think we appreciate today how remote New South Wales is. That, in fact, when the First Fleet got here, it's not unlike sending a mission to the moon. They didn't know what they were going to find. They didn't know how it was going to be managed, what the resources were. And for heaven's sake, they sent the scum of Britain in the form of convicts here to make it work. So one of the things the muster can tell us is how successful that experiment was after 12 years. It's sort of a recap on what have we achieved. There are several lists, quite frustratingly unnamed, though they've been allocated names in the past. We know it starts in June 1800, and there's a bit of correspondence between King and Hunter saying, will you do this bit, this bit? Both of them knew that what they had to bring under control was the role of the military in the New South Wales Corps. That had been their job in the mid-1790s, and Hunter is traditionally understood as not really getting it under control. But he and King exchanged correspondence. We need to get a handle on where they have taken advantage of the public purse. And so the lists in part are trying to bring that information together. It's a document that's been altered over time. We've already heard part of it was in pencil, and you can see the pencil marks here. You can see where someone's inked over it. It seems to be in the one hand, but now we can see it closer. I'm sure there's going to be calligraphers and others who are going to try and work out how many people were involved in putting these different lists together. And we think it goes up to after Hunter's gone into 1802. How do we know that? Because from the lists of people that are allocated there, we know their ships came after 1800. So it's pretty rough paper, and you have to remember the paper has to come from England. The ink has to come from England. The pencils have to come halfway around the world. Probably get feathers for their quills from the local chooks, but I'm not sure that they had the geese that I think they're meant to have. And it's a working copy with scribbles over the pages, where they've changed their mind, they've crossed things out, they've updated the information. So it's very much an administrator's working document. And as far as I can see, it seems to me the King was really trying to get a handle on government expenditure. You know, all these officers who had all of these servants working for them, and who fed them? The government. Do they need to be on the government lists? What else can be done? All of those people, so what you get are lists and lists and lists of on stores, meaning the government was feeding them, off stores, they're looking after themselves. So you start to get a sense of people who are doing their own thing. And there are separate lists for public officials, for the military. So clearly King is honing in on the people whom he believes is really rotting the system, I guess is the way we would see it. But the other part of what King is trying to do is to get a handle on the population. True, there are no Aboriginal people named in it, but there are convicts, freed convicts, emancipists, the military, the administrators. And you have to remember that our convict population were not all British. Look up John Randall, do his history. Here we have a black man listed, but they don't tell you that in the muster. You have to link it to other records. It's so important for family composition. Yes, as genealogists, we've had the list of names, but it's actually looking at the pages overall and saying, okay, these people came as adults with some children, but where are the children? Who are they with? How many of them are there? This we can get by just scanning the pages. It's so exciting. We also have a sense of their economic achievements. And I think we sometimes, because in this period we focus on the military, we forget the achievements of the emancipated convicts because they're listed here with what they have, the land, the crops, the animals, so that we can see who's growing more maize than wheat. We know probably over the poorer settlers rely on maize rather than wheat. Who would have known that there were so many goats in the colony? We don't have them as part of our regular livestock today. Sheep, yes, we've all heard of John MacArthur. Sheep, cattle. Remember, they'd only just found the lost cattle at the cow pastures. Not a lot of cattle around. But boy, were there a lot of goats and pigs. And, you know, someone's going to do a wonderful story on those when they look at this. We get a sense of the early place names, where they are, what they're called. So yes, there's Sydney and Parramatta and Hawkesbury. But Martyn and I were looking at it. We've had the pleasure of touching it. Toongabbie, spelt as two words. The Northern Boundaries. Kissing Point, always abbreviated as KP. Not KPIs for those administrators amongst you. So that we have a quite different understanding of the geographical spread, because in 1800, the colony didn't go beyond the Hawkesbury. There's no Blue Mountains being crossed. Once you got to the Hawkesbury, the nearest next place is India. They didn't actually know what was between, but, you know, that's the excitement of seeing what they're calling places, what names they're using. And in a sense, it's not just about people. Because we're so accustomed to have used it for genealogical research, what is in there is a sort of a skills audit, a sense of King trying to work out what were the key government functions that he had to allocate convict labour to. And so we get descriptions of the type of work that should be done in agriculture, of what stockmen are doing. That seems fairly useful. But they're already talking about boat building skills, about making roads, about what work the wheelwrights will do, and the perennial question for why the First Fleet came, he has flax dressers there and their responsibilities. You'll have to read another book if you want to know about them. So some of the writing, you've got to concentrate on it, but you'll have the advantage because you can blow it up on the digital thing. So here, under buildings, building a magistrate's house and barracks at Castle Hill. Remember, there's about to be an Irish rebellion there in a few years. A store for the reception of wheat at the Hawkesbury, where in fact I think they execute some of those Irish convicts. Finishing a church at Sydney and Parramatta. Repairing and whitewashing, for health reasons, the barracks and other public buildings. Quarrying and working stone, making and burning bricks and tiles, splitting palings, shingles, blacksmiths. Here is a man about to come on to managing all of this, who's actually working out each of the tasks that need to be done. So what more can we learn now we can see the whole thing? Because I think in its entirety, it tells us a somewhat different story than simply the list of names we've had before. Part of it is what we can see about making a new life. Yes, the military officers were acquiring land at a rapid pace and using convict servants. But what we're also seeing are emancipated convicts making away, not just relying on grants, but purchasing land, renting land, actually making a go of it in their own terms. What we see is the number of animals, the different ways in which different social groups have reliance on pigs versus sheep. We can start to see that. But I think the most important thing we're going to see now is rethinking the role of women. Because the next muster that everyone uses is the 1806 muster, where Marsden goes through it and damns all the women of the colony for not being married. The start of the denigration of women in Australian history. But if we look at this muster, what we see are independent women, some of whom are now widows. In the 12 years of settlement, they've had relationships, they've had children, they're now by themselves, managing small farms, looking after their children. The totality of it is something that will give us new grounds to look at women in the early years, how they're becoming self-supporting. They don't need to be living with someone else. They're running their own affairs. And as I said before, a large number, we don't know how many, of invisible people who were the free wives of convicts who accompanied their convict partner and came here voluntarily because they weren't the government's responsibility. So some of them crop up in the lists, some of them don't. So there is a great opportunity, I think, for us to look at women. So I could make you read it all. And I suspect, looking at the audience here, you're probably good enough you could actually read that handwriting. I don't think any of my students could have. And yes, there are plenty of famous names there. What I want to do in closing is to suggest it's not the famous people that this is going to open up doors, but it's the lesser known figures. So I just want to mention one of the people in the book, one John Stogdill, who comes on the First Fleet on the Alexander in 1788, and he dies the year after. So his whole life is caught within the pages of what the muster represents. He's a thief, gets caught, 14 years sentence, comes out here, pardoned by 1796. In the muster, it shows he's got 140 pigs, 450 sheep, 160 goats, 16 oxen, 13 horses, 278 acres of wheat, and 50 in maize, supporting 2 men on stores, 1 woman on stores, and 1 child on stores. No one's off stores. But then the annotation is he is one of those convicts who are managing grants for officers. It's under his name, it's not his stuff. And it's interesting, immediately above him is a man who does appear in our books all the time, for Andrew Thompson. At this time he's only got 16 pigs. I mean, he's just not competitive, really. So Stogdill is largely unknown, but thanks to the work of one of my students, Jan Barclay-Jack, she did a lot of combing the records. The list doesn't exist by itself. You need to do other research. And when you do other research, you discover that Stogdill was a personal servant, a valet, probably why he nicked all the stuff. He comes out and he is a servant for John Palmer of Woolloomooloo. It's Stogdill who supervises the building up of the Woolloomooloo estate. But more than that, Stogdill has the most unusual trade. He is a barber. And when you read the accounts in Tench and Collins, after Philip was speared at Manly in the 7th of September 1790, there's a whole range of negotiations of trying to get Bennelong and the Aboriginal community to come back into Sydney. And so parties of officials go to Manly to talk to Bennelong. The main accounts don't mention by name, but they do mention that the convict who went with them was a barber. And Stogdill aimed with his cutthroat razor, it's not a safety razor world, and his scissors. When he gets to Manly, Bennelong asks him to shave him. In our engagement, in terms of first contact, we haven't really thought about anything that personal. That a man with a very sharp razor is working on the face of Bennelong. And Stogdill, as the convict, comes back a month later with the Reverend Richard Johnson to stay as hostages with the Aboriginal community at Manly for the safe return of Bennelong, who's coming to Sydney. And while he's there, Barangaroo, who she isn't really happy with all of this dealing with the strangers, but she lets Stogdill use his scissors and give her a haircut, a bit of a trim and tidy up. So when we think of first contact, I think we have to go a long way further down than what we're doing, and this muster opens it. Well, what about Stogdill's famous personal life? He does marry. His wife dies 2 years later. She's buried in the cemetery under Sydney Town Hall. He spends money and talent in getting an elaborate coffin plate done for her, which they find when they build Town Hall Station. So, hidden amongst the ordinary people, I think we've got a new history thanks to this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. You always bring it alive. Every time I hear you talk, you bring it alive. It's like you're talking about your relatives, not just the one with, so many off-stores, on-store children. Yeah. Okay. Right. Now, that is a hard act to follow, and I'm not going to. So I'm going to show you how to access the muster book, and I'm sure you're really keen to get your hands on it virtually. Okay. Escape. Now the tech has to work. Give me a second. You have your little bookmarks with the QR codes, and I'm sure some of you have had a little cheat look, have you? Yep. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to access the muster book from the Parliament site. So, about Parliament, Parlimento. All working? All good. Okay, good. This is Parlimento. To get to the muster book, we have this little collection here. There are two parts. We're concentrating on the settlers muster book, but there is another list of convicts allocated to officers that you can explore. Okay. This is how it looks digitally. You can go through and read it. And like Carol said, some of you probably will and enjoy that. But if you are looking for something specific, I'm going to show you how you can do that. Now, I was going to use Mary Wade because she had 21 children and she's got 10,000 descendants, apparently, and one of them being our very own Mr. Speaker and former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, who he told me yesterday. But I'm going to go with year. I'm going to look up James Squire. So you just type in a name. We've transcribed all the names. I need my mouse to work. Okay, just giving you a little brief view of what else is in the muster book, in Parlimento. So if you click here, okay, now I need my glasses, excuse me for a sec. There's a Sarah Squires, we're going to James Squires. And James Squires is the brewer, right, Carol? Yep. Just Kissing Point. Okay, now, yep, he's there somewhere. No, that's I've got this. Press text, transcription, and you can see that he's just about 6 down. Now, this is where the magic of Martyn and his team comes in. Click on zoom. Zoom it in. There's James Squires there. And all the information. And it's so much easier to read than this. Absolutely so much easier to read. So that is the muster book. I'm going to let you have fun with that. Just a warning, it's better on a computer than on a phone, especially if you want to delve in and do the research on it. Okay, we go back to Parlimento. I imagine some of you are familiar with the City of Sydney archives. I'm sure a lot of you use it. Yeah, there's lots of nodding heads. You'll see that it's very familiar. It's a Recollect database. So this is what it looks like. Now, I don't know if you realised, but we had a royal visit here on the weekend. We also had one in 1954, and it was captured a completely different way. Back in 1954, somebody, and you're getting a look at some of the pictures you can see of the Queen's visit, somebody put together a photo album, more like a scrapbook actually. And you can go through and have a look at the pictures in the photo album. If you go a little bit further, there's also the newspaper articles of the time in the scrapbook, which is pretty cool, but there's more. I pressed the wrong button. While you're looking at the scrapbook, you can also listen to the commentary of her speech and the commentary of the day when she was walking up Macquarie Street and coming into Parliament. Okay, what else do we have in Parlimento? We have a menus timeline. So you can see what the restaurants in Parliament were serving to people from, let me get my dates right, from 1883 up until the 1960s. And you can also see the menu from last Sunday, which has also just been put on Parlimento today. So I just have a quick look at one, just random. I don't know what it's going to say. Again, we'll zoom in. It's in French. Okay, what? Oh, yeah. We also have some really quirky things in the parliamentary archives. And we are gradually going to go through and put these onto Parlimento. So Parlimento is a site that you should come back to every so often. We've got a lot ready to go, and it shouldn't be too long. I'm sorry. Oh, while Mr. Presidency, we've also got timelines of the presidents and the speaker. That's a timeline that works out like this. And you can get some information about them. We have, before I get to the quirky bits, I forgot. This used to be the library, as Mark said. So we have photos of what it looked like when it was a working library. To me, it looks like a WHS nightmare. Actually, we have photos here where people had their desks on these high levels. They actually had their desks on their high levels and had to come all the way down the stairs to get a cup of tea. So, yep. It's not like that anymore. Also, we have pictures of the facade over the years, Macquarie Street over the years. There's lots there. Just go explore. You have access now. You can enjoy the history of Parliament, the quirky things. This is a piece of fabric from the seat of Charles Kingsford Smith's Southern Cross aeroplane. Somebody rode on it, unfortunately. I mean, we wouldn't let that happen now, but I'm not exactly sure how we got it, but we have it. The other thing I want to show you is this. Come on. I'll go back to browse. This postcard. This is a postcard of when the Harbour Bridge was being built. On the back of the postcard, I might zoom in a bit so you can see it. This postcard was carried, it'll come, carried by the aeroplane, the Southern Cross. You can see the postmark, the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You can see that it was posted on the bridge during the opening celebrations. And it has some signatures, of some quite important people of the time, including Charles Kingsford Smith, Jack Lang, John Bradfield, and you can go and look up the rest of them yourselves because you can now. You can do that. That's really all I want to show you about that. But I do also want to shout out to a couple of members of my staff. One of them who's standing down the back trying to hide. Susan Walton, who's a manager of the collection services, who is solely responsible for the muster book being placed on the UNESCO History of the Memory of the World Register. She also kicked off the collaboration with Museums of History. She actually, it's a funny story. Susan had to take it personally to Kingswood and couldn't take it alone, so another staff member had to go with her. So then we weren't allowed to know when she was going. I wasn't allowed to know when she was going. It had to be done. It was so very cloak and dagger because it's such a priceless document that she had in her hands. And Martyn's team had to be on call, had to do it that day, couldn't keep it overnight, weren't allowed to. So thank you to both of you for that. And also to Joy Phillip, who is the manager of Records and Archives, who isn't here today. And the only reason she isn't here is because she's at an archivist conference, so I'm going to excuse her for that. But she has become the expert in Parlimento, and she's made it her baby, and she's she's done some amazing work, and I'm very, very grateful for her for doing that. Okay. So, like I said, we'll keep adding to Parlimento. It will be a great place for you to go in and find the history of Parliament, among other things like Charles Kingsford Smith. I want to thank our speakers. We've spent a lot of time together over the last few days. It's been wonderful. So thank you so much for your fascinating insights. And it's a privilege for us, to the Parliamentary Library and Archives and Parliament more generally, to showcase the muster book and to launch Parlimento today. So I encourage you to get online, check it out, find something new. You never know. Something might be coming up. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to ask Martyn and Carol to come back here. We have some mics, so please wait until the mic gets to you so the people online can hear your question. So, questions, please. Okay, thanks.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Peter Hobbins from the Australian National Maritime Museum. Thank you, Carol and Martyn. Does the muster include only people resident in the colony, or did it include those who were passing through? I'm thinking obviously of seafarers who were coming into port.
As far as we can see, it's only people here. But in looking at Stogdill and the officers listed that he was managing for, Captain Melville, he's not a military officer, I think he's a sea captain. So again, it's reading into the annotations, the comments, the crossing out in the document. But from what we can see, it's people resident here because there's so much emphasis on livestock.
Was Melville in Parramatta?
Don't know.
Was Melville's land in Parramatta?
Doesn't say, because he's not mentioned specifically. And Stogdill was working between Sydney, Concord and the Hawkesbury, and drowned on the way to the Hawkesbury. So.
Thank you. Hi there. Thank you very much for your time today, and everything has been terrific. Just I've got a personal query from one of my ancestors. If his name was William Tunks, one of them on the First Fleet. I know he went to Norfolk Island at some stage as well. Do we know if, like, I'll go through the register and see if he's on the muster, but if he was not there, he would probably in Norfolk Island. Was there any sort of muster done at Norfolk Island at the same time?
I can just point to the red book that's got a Norfolk Island register in it.
Do you want me to model that?
Yeah, do please. Please, one red book. The red book, Keith and Mel's wonderful biographical data in this red book is how many of us got into this type of record in the first place. And for Norfolk Island, that's where you'd be looking.
Hi, Carol. Michelle, I'm the historian Northern Beaches Council, and I'm fascinated by all the stuff on Bennelong and Barangaroo coming to Manly. Stuff I've never heard that about the haircuts or anything. Is that easy to find within the muster book?
Well, Stogdill's entry is there, but for the story I told you, you need to go to Jan Barclay Jack's book, Hawkesbury Settlement Revealed, which was published, 2005. Got my centuries right. Anyway, it's in a big printed book that looks at Hawkesbury settlement up to 1802. And she tracked down all the bits. And largely we know it because in state records are all the court cases, because Stogdill died and everybody wanted a bit of the action to say he was their agent. So.
The red book, is that digitised or will it be digitised?
No. Oh, well.
We might talk to some people?
It's indexed in the biographical database of Australia online as individual entries. That's why what the Parliament has done is so important. It's the whole book. So we've had access to the names for a long time, but it's the whole book and that story that is the new bit. But see Keith about the Red Book.
This is about law and order in 1800. Clearly there was no ICAC then. Your presentation alluded to some ill-gotten gains of property, for instance. What happened? You've got a muster book in 1800, and the property of some people seemed in 12 years seems such a lot. The acquisition of that, was that ever explained, or was the muster book designed to look at things like that?
It was designed to control it, because what we know is that when Governor Phillip left, the colony was managed by the New South Wales Corps, and they dismantled a lot of the appropriate controls that Phillip had had. And so that left it as a bit of a free-for-all for the military officers in particular. And because they had access to their pay, they could have access to cargoes and bring in what we often describe as rum from India and Indonesia to make profits. So they had been a profiteering military junta running the place for a while, in modern terms. And Hunter and King's job was to bring that back under control. But what we also see is it gave opportunities for ex-convicts, for emancipists. So whilst the main history book story is about the military, hidden underneath there, I think, is the achievements that the former convicts were able to make.
Naomi? It's coming, yeah.
Just a quick question about access. If you go into the Museums of History website, and you've just typed in the regular search box, will this come up, or is it a standalone kind of unit?
It's both searchable and browsable, Naomi, on the NSW website.
That is so awesome.
Yep.
Everyone's just going to die of joy.
Well, hopefully death by archives won't happen.
I can already see that the rest of my week is gone. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. You can imagine the fun we've had looking at it for real with...
Yeah. And now it's had its moment in the sun, so please have a look at it before you go, because it's going away for a few years and it's not coming back for a few years. Needs to go back and have a rest. Are there any more questions? Because we're almost at time. One more question, yeah, down the back.
You mentioned goats. So do we know, were those goats given by the government to people to look after? And were there many women who took ownership of goats?
The answer on the women's ownership of goats is read the book. The broader answer is that we know that the government brought in livestock particularly from South Africa, because it's quite hard to bring live animals into Australia then, for different reasons than now. And so the government did give settlers a cow or a calf or some form of livestock. But I don't know. I assume that the goats and pigs, because our history's been geared around the cattle that got loose and John MacArthur and his sheep. And really, there's a lot more to be done about goats and pigs.
You heard it here. Any more questions? One more quickly.
Sorry.
Just quickly on the answer to the goats. Normally what was happened is they were given small baby ones to breed. The whole concept, of course, was to get them off the government stores and to get them self-sufficient and then to get past that. Just for the gentleman that was asking about William Tunks, he had 60 acres on the left of the Cascade Road on Norfolk Island. Yeah.
Okay, you need to talk to this gentleman. Thank you. Mark?
Thank you.
Mark?
Sadly, everyone, that is bringing us to the end of today's presentation, but you all have homework, so that is the good news coming out from today's session. Before we close up, Deb did a great job at acknowledging the work of Susan and Joy, and I wanted to add my voice to that. But these things don't happen without leadership, and Deb has provided amazing leadership in this space, not just with this product, with the Parlimento and the Muster book, but what does it take to be an excellent 21st century Westminster-based Parliament library? And it is not what it took to be an excellent 20th century Westminster-based Parliament. And Deb has been leading, not just in what you've seen today, but leading across an array of areas to make sure that we adapt here in the Parliament to make sure that we are serving both this institution and all of you as members of public. We are here to serve the people of New South Wales, and Deb has been an incredible leader in that space. So I'd like you to join me in a round of applause for everyone involved. And we'll stop. And then I would also like you to join me in a round of applause for our two wonderful speakers, Martyn and Carol. What great presentations today. So get your phones out, scan the QR code, start looking things up, and we hope to see you at a future Parliament event. Thank you all for coming along today. It is wonderful to meet you. Thank you.